In this video I'll be looking at achieving various colour effects with different infrared filters when shooting video. This is a follow-up to my previous video where I looked at a variety of infrared filters and the effects you can get when shooting stills photos. With video you are much more dependent on getting the white balance correct in camera, even when shooting in part-baked RAW video format. These tests were all shot on full spectrum converted Canon R5 in H.265 format with Canon log 2 gamma curve. The ISO was 800, the aperture was f8 and the shutter speed was varied as necessary depending on the exposure. I didn't make any attempt to keep a 180-degree shutter angle. And unless otherwise stated, all these clips have the Canon log 2 to Rec 709 LUT applied as the final step, and I processed them in DaVinci Resolve. So to start off with, we'll look at a visible, or technically this is visible plus UV, but there's so little UV light you might as well take it to just be visible, shot for comparison. This is the Lee 101 yellow filter, exposed about 1/3 of a stop before clipping on the camera LCD histogram. The exposure has then been corrected in post. For this particular shot, pulling the exposure back down seems to have recovered the highlights quite well. On the camera LCD with View Assist turned on, which compensates for the flat look of log, the image looked very overexposed. And this is the same Lee 101, but exposed about a stop before clipping on the histogram. This is the previous clip, but with a -92-degree hue shift after the C-Log to Rec 709 LUT is applied. Now instead this is with the hue shift applied on the base node before the LUT. This gives a bit more saturation to the image. The videos I all shot using custom white balance with custom white balance preset images that I'd taken previously. I'll post a separate video on this, but the preset images are based on photos of clouds taken with the different filters. In the previous shots you could see the white balance was slightly warm. For this shot I've white balanced in post on the clouds. I suspect either the light was a bit warmer when shooting these videos compared to when I took the custom white balance preset images, or it could just be down to using a different lens between the videos and the preset images. This is my attempt at candy pink processing with the Lee 101 shot. It seems with video I cannot achieve the same results as I did with stills in Adobe Camera Raw. Mainly the colours are not as strong in video as I can easily achieve in ACR. This may well be down to my inexperience with video editing rather than an inherent difference between video and stills though. Here I went with a strong EIR channel swap, that is the red channel was set to -25 red, -25 green, 150 blue. The green channel was set to 150 red, 0 green, -50 blue, and the blue channel was set to 0 red, 150 green, and -50 blue. But yet the resulting image is very pastel. If we play around a bit with the exposure and curves, plus add a small amount of saturation, we can achieve a much stronger colour. Though I'd say it's still slightly weaker than what you'd get with a still photo taken with the same filter. A slightly different hue shift combined with a strong EIR channel swap will give pink foliage and a blue sky. Moving on to the CB565 orange filter. Again, a previously created white balance preset image was used for white balance, and this initial shot was exposed about 1/3 of a stop before clipping the histogram. The shot then had the exposure pulled back down in post. If you look at the tops of the clouds, you can see parts look pretty blown out, despite the histogram on the camera LCD showing no clipping. This shot was exposed about 1 stop below the histogram clipping, then exposure pulled down in post. The highlights in the cloud look much better to me than the previous video, so I would say exposing 1 stop before clipping the histogram is probably best exposure-wise when shooting log. This is the same shot, but in post it has been white balanced on the clouds and a -122-degree hue shift applied. Again, we're getting very pastel colours. This is exactly the same clip, but without adjusting the white balance in post at all. This is the same clip again, but this time white balanced on the clouds and a -56-degree hue shift applied in post. This gives more purple foliage and a cyan sky. Again, the same clip but with different adjustments in post. This time white balance was set on the clouds, a strong EIR channel swap was applied, a strong curves adjustment and various exposure adjustments, but no LUT was applied at the end of this one. Next, on to the red filter. Similar to before, this was exposed about 1/3 of a stop before clipping on the histogram, then exposure adjusted in post. As you can see, the highlights in the clouds look pretty gone, even though the histogram was not indicating any clipping. It may well be that using better exposure tools on an external monitor would resolve this in terms of being more accurate and larger so you can see what's going on, but the external monitor I have isn't that great in sunlight, so I don't tend to use it. Exposing one stop below clipping on the histogram gives us a much better result. This is the same clip as the previous one, but in post white balance was set on the clouds and a red-blue channel swap was performed. The image is very low contrast and pastel as if no LUT had been applied. If we make exposure changes and remove the LUT, we can get a much more contrasty result, but the yellow colour of the foliage we expect to see is still very pale. If we go back to the previous processing but add curves, we can get both more contrast and colour, though the yellow is still quite weak compared to what I'd expect on a still image taken with the same filter and a red-blue channel swap applied. This is the same video clip, white balanced on the clouds and with a 180-degree hue shift applied this time. And finally, with a -135-degree hue shift, we get light pink foliage and a blue sky. The Zomei 720 filter looks pretty similar in video to what I'd get from it in stills. The image is mainly monochrome with a slight bit of colour. As before, I also shot this exposed a stop before clipping the histogram, though for these particular two shots there's not much difference. This next one was a happy accident. I forgot to set the white balance before taking this clip with the plastic Hitech ND 0.6 filter, so it was still set at the white balance for the Zomei 720nm filter. This gave white foliage and a bright blue sky. Using the preset white balance image for the filter gives us a more normal blue colour sky and slightly purple foliage. Again, I also shot this one stop away from clipping on the histogram, but there is not much difference here. It seems the benefit of exposing one stop before clipping is greater when using the strongly coloured filters like the yellow, orange and red. The Lee 139 plus 1mm thick GRB3 gives us the desired image in camera without any hue adjustments or channel swaps necessary. It gives candy pink foliage and a cyan sky. The colours are much stronger here than the basic colour filters. This clip was underexposed in camera by about one stop compared to the previous one, but there doesn't seem to be much difference in highlight detail. And finally, the previous clip, but with white balance applied in post on the clouds. The Lee 729 plus 2mm thick GRB3 filter is meant to give an image similar to aerochrome with red foliage, and it does that straight out of camera. Again, the colours are much more saturated than with our basic colour filters. Exposing one stop before clipping the histogram doesn't seem to make any difference again. White balancing on the clouds in post makes less difference here. This is probably because the custom white balance preset image for this filter was shot at a different time to the white balance images used for all the other filters. Presumably the lighting at the time this image was shot more closely matched the lighting at the time I was shooting these test videos. Lastly, not an IR filter, but the Baader U UV pass filter. Probably not a great scene for testing this filter, and the lens isn't this great either, and it had to be shot at f4. But the fact that the image isn't all purple shows that using a white balance preset image with it does work. Trying to shoot the clip at ISO 3200 rather than 6400, and reducing exposure in post doesn't really make much difference. In conclusion, I would say that if you are relatively unfamiliar with video processing like me, then it will be difficult to achieve the same strong punchy images in video as you can get when shooting infrared stills. The more complex filters like the Lee 139 plus GRB3 or Lee 729 plus GRB3, and no doubt the similar Colorivision Candy Chrome and IR Chrome filters, give much nicer results with no real processing required. In terms of exposure when shooting log, at least with C-Log 2 and using the histogram on the rear LCD to judge exposure with the Canon R5, I would say it's best to shoot about a stop under clipping on the right of the histogram. It means you may not be minimising noise as much as you could be, but at least there's less risk of clipping highlights.